transverse section of midbrain at two levels. One is at the level of the superior colliculus, and then one is at inferior colliculus. So as we know, the midbrain is the smallest part of the brain. The ventral part is called the interpeduncular fossa. There are the two optic nerves coming from the eyeball, from the orbit, and they crossing in the midline. There is the optic chiasma. Laterally, after crossing, they go as the optic tract. So this is the ventral aspect. The crus cerebri are visible with the medial and the lateral border. The medial body is related to the oculomotor nerve, and lateral body is related to the trochlear nerve. Then in the midline, hanging is the stalk or the infundibulum of the pituitary gland. And in the midline here lies the tuber cineurium, and posteriorly there are two mammillary bodies, and there is the posterior perforated substance. So this corresponds to the interpeduncular fossa, that is the ventral aspect of the midbrain. Midbrain ends at the upper border of the pons, where the basilar artery lies in the basilar sulcus, and it gives us two terminal branches. Posterior cerebral arteries in the interpeduncular fossa, which form the circle of Willis. The circle of Willis is also the content of the interpeduncular fossa. It is formed here. So this is the posterior cerebral artery, and the upper border of the pons is related to the superior cerebellar artery. Superior cerebellar. So this is the ventral aspect of the midbrain. The dorsally, what we see here, this is the end of the cerebrum, ventral aspect. Posterior dorsally, there are the corpora quadrigemina, which is large superior colliculi and comparatively small size inferior colliculi. And they are well separated by the cruciform sulcus. And they are made up of the grey matter. So later to them there arises the white matter in the form of bundle. That is called the brachium of the superior colliculus and brachium of inferior colliculus. In between the two superior colliculi in the upper border, there lies the third eye, that is called the pineal gland, or it is also called epiphysis cerebri, because of its photoreceptor cells. Then, from below the inferior colliculus, there is the emergence of obliquely running bundle of fibers which goes from the midbrain and connect the midbrain with the cerebellum. This is the superior cerebellar peduncle, which forms the property of the dorsal surface of the pons. And the upper medial border of the superior cerebellar peduncle, they are joined by a thin sheet in the floor of the fourth ventricle anteriorly is the superior medullary velum. And in this superior medullary velum, there is only the exceptional nerve comes out of the dorsal surface of the brain is the trochlear nerve in the superior medullary velum substance. So this this is how we make the fourth nerve, that is the trochlear, coming after crossing from the superior medullary vein. So this is the diagram, ventral and the dorsal aspect of this. Then we cut the dorsal section at the level of the inferior colliculus, because we are coming from below upwards. So we have finished with the upper bone, so we will do the level of the superior colliculus, inferior colliculus. So we take dorsal 2 points, dorsal and the ventral point. The dorsal point is here in the midline. It shows the two elevations of the grey matter underlying, that is the inferior colliculus. Then laterally, the brachium of the collicular, and this is the ventral point. The ventral point is having the medial point on either side. We cut the crus cerebri. In the cut section, the crus cerebri are visible like this. And meeting very with the sections. So this is the outline we have drawn with the help of the ventral and the dorsal surface of the midbrain. Then we fill inside story. As you know, the colliculi, they are made up of the grey matter. So in this section we show the grey matter in the form of the crossing grey matter. So this is what we have made, the inferior colliculus grey matter. Then inside this ventrally there are the crus cerebri in the medial border, and this is the lateral border. And medial border is having, when the cut section is there, so deep to the crus cerebri. Crus means bundle, cerebri means they are coming from cerebrum, so they are the most composed of the projection fibers. So projection fibers, as we know, they are of 3 types: corticospinal, corticonuclear, and the corticopontine. So all fibers, they are accommodated in the crus cerebri, but they are having the very definite arrangement that you have to remember. It is divided into 6 parts, from medial to lateral part. In the medial 1/6, it contains the frontopontine fiber. Then in the middle 2/6, is the corticospinal and corticonuclear fibers. And the lateral 3/6 contains the remaining paritopontine, temporopontine, and occipitopontine fiber. So this is the arrangement. And the corticospinal fibers lying in the crus cerebri, they have also a definite arrangement. The fibers of corticospinal having the, from the head and neck, they lie medially. Then come the upper limb. Then come the thorax, abdomen, and lower limb lies the lateral. So that is, you have to remember that the body is represented from medial to lateral side. Half of the body, other side. And corticonuclear fibers, as we know, corticonuclear fibers, they are coming from the genu of the, they are present in the genu of the internal cavity. They are the motor fibers for head and neck only. And they are also present in medium. So deep to the crus cerebri, when we remove the crus cerebri, deep to this, there lies the black pigmented area. Here, deep to the crus cerebri, dorsal to the cerebral lies the zone of the pigmented neurons. These pigmented neurons, they give the grayish or black color to this strip of the gray matter, which is called substantia nigra. Substantia nigra, because of their cytoplasm of these neurons, they contain black melanin pigment, which gives the black color to this. And we know the midbrain is the smallest part. In the lateral view, anteriorly or ventrally there is a crus cerebri, and dorsally there is a superior and the inferior colliculus. Superior colliculus is related to the sight or eye, and inferior colliculus with the ear or the hearing. And from below the inferior colliculus there is a bundle of superior cerebellar peduncle, which is going into the cerebellum. So when we cut the sagittal section of the midbrain, we find inside a ventricle which is filled with the CSF, which is coming above from the third ventricle and going down with the fourth ventricle. So this smallest part of the narrowest part of the ventricular system of the brain is called the cerebral aqueduct. Cerebral aqueduct. So when you cut at the level of the inferior colliculus, so in the midline we see here is the cerebral aqueduct filled with the CSF, and around this there lies the central gray matter of the midbrain. Central gray matter of the midbrain. It is also called the para-aqueductal gray matter. Para-aqueductal. Gray matter of the midbrain. Then the reticular formation also lies over here. So reticular formation lies in the whole of the brain stem. So reticular formation is also visible. It contains various nuclei of the respiratory and the cardiac. And in this para-aqueductal gray matter, so when we put a line horizontally, the midbrain internally divided into two parts. The dorsal part is called tectum, and the ventral part is called tegmentum. The tectum part is small, and tegmentum part is large. So same the spelling also. How to remember? Tectum is small spelling, so it is small part that is appear in the inferior corpora quadrigemina. Tegmentum word is bigger, so it is ventral part. So then coming from the upper pons, we know here lies the various lemnisci. So one lemniscus is lying over here. Lateralmost is the lateral lemniscus. Then medial to this is the spinal lemniscus, and medialmost is the medial lemniscus. The same as we have done in the upper pons, same medial lemniscus, spinal lemniscus, the lateral lemniscus, and more lateralmost is the trigeminal lemniscus. All lemnisci, they are in one line. Depending upon their names, lateral is laterally, medial is medial. And trigeminal has occupied the same position dorsally with the gray and white matter together. So this is the mesencapsular nucleus of the trigeminal. Over here is near to the reticular formation. Then from the lateral border of the crus cerebri, which is the level of this section, at the level of inferior colliculus, there is the emergence of the trochlear neuron. The trochlear nerve is coming from the dorsal aspect. This is the ventral, this is the dorsal. And here lies the trochlear nerve nucleus in the para-aqueductal gray matter. And as this is the special nerve arising from the dorsal aspect, it is the thinnest cranial nerve, and number third specialty, it has got crossed fibers. So this crossing takes place in the superior medullary velum. This is the hair in between the superior medullary velum, and this is the dorsal aspect. So this is the emergence of the fourth nerve from here. So right and left crossing takes place in the superior medullary velum and exit of the nerve. So this will how we show. Nerve is coming from the dorsal aspect. So this section is cut. Then this superior cerebellar peduncle. So these fibers, they are going in and out. They are the afferent and efferent connection of the cerebellum with the midbrain. So when we dissect these fibers upward, so what will they? They will cross because they are obliquely placed. So at the level of the inferior colliculi or deep to the inferior colliculus, we see their crossing over. So here we see the crossing over the dorsal to the inferior colliculi. That is the decussation of superior cerebellar peduncle. So this is how we show the decussation of superior cerebellar peduncle inside it. Then we also see here a tract which is descending from this upper part of the midbrain, and here near the medial lemniscus there lies the tectospinal tract. Tectospinal tract. Tecto means it is coming from the tectum of the midbrain, and spinal means it is going into the spinal cord. So it lies in the ventral funiculus of the spinal cord, and this lateral one bundle is called the rubrospinal tract. So both these tracts, they are the occupation in the anterior column of the white matter of the spinal cord we have done already. So rubrospinal, it starts from the rubro means red nucleus. Spinal means it is going to the spinal cord. So it is also visible in this section of the inferior colliculus. So this is how to draw the, whenever a section comes of the midbrain at the level of the inferior colliculus, then you should draw like this. Another diagram for this midbrain is the upper part that is called the, at the level of the superior colliculus. Superior colliculus, so our cutting line goes in the upper part at the level of the third nerve oculomotor, and the same line now crossing the, cutting the superior colliculus. So outline is the same. Outline of the midbrain at the level of the superior or the inferior colliculus is the same, but with a little difference. Ventrally, the crus cerebri is the same. Substantia nigra is also the same. The medial lemniscus, tectospinal is the same. Spinal lemniscus is also the same. But there is no lateral lemniscus. So you have to remove the lateral lemniscus, which will form lateral lemniscus, will be getting no marks. Don't make lateral lemniscus at the level of the superior colliculus. As you know, lateral lemniscus is the auditory pathways. Auditory pathways, they are coming from the spinal cord, ascending in the midbrain, in the medulla, then into the bones, and then these lateral lemniscus fibers, they terminate or relay in the inferior colliculus, which is auditory in function. So they cannot ascend up to the level of the superior colliculus. So they will terminate here. From here they will go into the brachium of the inferior colliculus, and they will reach the medial geniculate body of the, what we have done in the metathalamus. And from there they go the auditory radiations, which constitute the sublentiform part of the internal capsule, and they reach the temporal lobe, that is the auditory area, 42 and 43. So they are already, we have completed it. That is the lateral lemniscus with the spinal cord. So now another structures we have to see is the at the level of the superior colliculus. A new structure is now visible, which is the most prominent part is the red nucleus. So red nucleus is visible here at the level of superior colliculus. Never make an exception of the inferior colliculus. So never. In the inferior colliculus, instead of the red nucleus, there lies the rubrospinal tract. It is replaced, but it is not here. So red nucleus, they lie at the level of only the superior colliculus. So here. So why it is called red nucleus? Because the cytoplasm of the neurons of the red nucleus, they contains the ferritin, iron pigment. Because of this, it gives the iron oxide color, that is the reddish color. That's why it's called the red nucleus. And it is made up of grey matter. So the white matter from here. And this red nucleus is well connected to the cerebrum, cerebellum. It is well connected to the basal ganglia and spinal cord. So it is having a wide variety of the connections. As we do the internal capsule also, we are doing the anterior limb, the genu, the posterior limb. Posterior limb contains the corticospinal of the head and neck, upper limb, thorax, abdomen, and lower limb posterior. And with these posterior limb, we also make the fibers that are called the cortico-rubral tract. If you remember the diagram of the internal capsule, with the lentiform nucleus lying laterally, with the globus pallidus and putamen, and this is the anterior part, horizontal section of the cerebrum at the level of the insular cortex. So this is the medial part. Genu. So cortico-rubral are the fibers start from the cerebrum, and they are also the descending fibers. So they are the motor fibers. So they accompany the corticospinal fibers, and they terminate into the red nucleus. So from cerebrum, they pass into the next part, the midbrain, and the midbrain at the level of the superior colliculus, which is nearer to the cerebrum. So they terminate from here. So this is how the cerebrum is connected to the red nucleus. Then the axons starting from the red nucleus, they cross in the ventral part of the tegmentum, because these fibers from the red nucleus, after receiving from the cortico-rubral fibers, now they descend into the lateral column of the spinal cord as the rubrospinal tract. So the axons from the red nucleus, they cross, and after crossing they descend into the lower part of the midbrain. At the level of the inferior colliculus, we have made this tract, the rubrospinal tract. So it is derived from here. So this rubrospinal, starting here, and it forms the crossing. And this crossing is called the ventral tegmental decussation, or it is also called decussation of the rubrospinal tract. This is decussation of the rubrospinal tract. Then another decussation we see in the dorsal part of the tegmentum, that is called the dorsal tegmental decussation. And this dorsal part of the decussation lies over here. These are the fibers from the tectospinal, from tectum part of the, at the level of the superior colliculus. These fibers which descend as the tectospinal tract, which is present ventrally, they come from the superior colliculus, because superior colliculus is having the visual and function. So these tectospinal tracts, they are derived the fibers from the gray matter of the superior colliculus. They cross over the dorsal part of this tegmentum. So here you will write down, insert here, the dorsal tegmental decussation. So they are fibers coming from the superior colliculus. And then these fibers, after crossing, they descend as the tectospinal tract. And these tectospinal tracts, they descend into the ventral part of the white matter. And the function of this is the movement of the eye towards the visual stimulus. So if we are going dark in the night and suddenly there is some flash of light somewhere, then automatically our body as well as the eyes, they move towards the source of the light, that is called the visual stimulus. So at that time, the superior colliculus, the tectospinal and the spinal cord ventral horn will be activated and our body is moved. So that is the function of tectospinal as well as the superior colliculus, that is the reflex movement of the eyeball and the body towards the source of the light. So this is the dorsal tegmental decussation. Now comes at the level of the red nucleus, there lies the para-aqueductal gray matter. So as you know, from the medial border at the level of the superior colliculus, which nerve lies? Third, the oculomotor nerve. So we want from this nerve, the oculomotor nerve we have to make, not this. So instead of the same nucleus lies over here, but now it is the third nerve nucleus, that is the oculomotor nerve nucleus. And as the oculomotor nerve arises from the ventral aspect, so we have to, and it is related to the medial border of the crus cerebri. So this is the medial border of the crus cerebri, ventral aspect. So nerve from this aqueduct, aqueductal gray matter, is the nuclei, and along with it there lies another nucleus, the parasympathetic nucleus, the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. If you remember, the Edinger-Westphal nucleus is a parasympathetic nucleus, responsible for pupillary reflex, and it is parasympathetic, so it supplies the sphincter pupillae. So parasympathetic is sphincter pupillae. It will constrict the pupil because it supplies the circular muscles of the iris. The sympathetic fibers, they supply the radial muscles of the iris, so they cause the dilatation. But parasympathetic, remember, underline it, it is the parasympathetic is doing the constriction of the pupil. That is also called sphincter pupillae, and sympathetic fibers, they do the dilatation of the pupil. So Edinger-Westphal nucleus is also lying very near to it. So nerve, as it comes out through the red nucleus, and then it comes from the medial part of the crus cerebri, the third, the oculomotor. So along this, it also accompanies the fibers of preganglionic parasympathetic fibers. They also accompany the oculomotor nerve. And this Edinger-Westphal nucleus containing preganglionic parasympathetic fibers, so they will relay in the ciliary ganglion, and then as the short ciliary nerve, they pierce the sclera and they enter into the choroid, the second layer of the eyeball, and then from here they reach the ciliary body as well as the circular smooth muscles of the iris. That we have done with the ciliary ganglion and the eyeball. So this is the third nerve coming out from the ventral aspect, from the relatively medial. So you have to show from medial border of the crus cerebri, as it is there in the interpedunculae fossa. So this is how we do the transverse section of the midbrain at the level of the superior colliculus, with all grey and white matter structures present over here. Now last part of this midbrain transverse section comes the applied anatomy. In the applied anatomy, there are two syndromes related to the diseases related to the lesion of the midbrain. One is called the Weber syndrome, and another is called the Benedicts syndrome. So Weber syndrome is the disease or the lesion of the midbrain. Both are at the level of the superior colliculus. And Weber syndrome is related to the occlusion or the injury to the posterior cerebral artery. Because posterior cerebral artery, as it is the terminal branch of the basilar artery, so and lies in the interpeduncular fossa, and it has got central branches which pierces the posterior perforated substance, and these central branches of the cerebral arteries, they reach near the center or the deep inside the brain. So this posterior perforated and the anterior perforated substance, they are made for central branches of the arteries of the circle of Willis. So there are two types of the arteries of the cerebrum. One is called the cortical branches, which are superficial, which supply the superficial structure of the brain. Other are the central branches. So these central branches, they are deep branches. So two areas has been given from where they go in deep inside the brain. One is the anterior perforated substances related to the base of the olfactory nerve, olfactory trigone, and another is this posterior perforated substance. So posterior perforated substance function is that it gives access to the central branch of the posterior cerebral artery to reach the deeper structure to supply them. So whenever this artery is occluded, or in the case of the tumor pressing TT and H is occurring to the basilar artery, now this supply to the crus cerebri by the posterior cerebral artery is lost. And this vascular lesion involves this wide area of the crus cerebri, and including the oculomotor nerve. So this is the area, shaded area is the region of what is called the Weber syndrome. So it involves the substantia nigra, which is very adjacent to the crus cerebri. It involves the crus cerebri, and it also involves the nearby, from the medial border, crus cerebri, oculomotor nerve is also there. So this area is damaged and give out of the function. So if you know the function of these structures, you can write down the sign and symptom the patient will come. So number one symptom is the oculomotor nerve is involved. So oculomotor nerve involvement in the Weber syndrome, the patient come with the symptoms of ophthalmoplegia. Ophthalmoplegia is the collective sign and symptoms of oculomotor nerve. So in the ophthalmoplegia, many things are happening to the patient. Number one, oculomotor nerve lesion lead to the paralysis of all the muscles of the eyeball. All extraocular muscles except lateral rectus, which is supplied by the epicenter nerve. Only lateral rectus is having the nerve supply, all other muscles they are involved. And what it lead to the? It lead to the divergent squint. The patient come with the complaint of divergent squint because of the unopposed action of the epicenter nerve is okay. So eye will be deviated towards the lateral side. This is the involvement of the oculomotor nerve. Then it also carries the Edinger-Westphal nuclei. So parasympathetic supply to eyeball is also cut off. So on the same side, on the only one eye, there will be dilatation of pupil. Because sphincter pupil is gone. The patient will be dilated pupil on the affected side of the Weber syndrome will be there. This is ophthalmoplegia. Then another problem is the oculomotor nerve also carries the sympathetic fibers, which also supply the LPS, levator palpebris superioris. So that is also affected, that lead to the ptosis, drooping of the eyelid of the affected side. So ptosis will be there because of the paralysis of the LPS. So that is how we give the ophthalmoplegia symptoms of the, if you know the function, if you know the oculomotor nerve supply, which part, then we can. Then it will also affect another reflexes, that is the accommodation reflex. Accommodation reflex is related to the changing of the thickness or the focal length of the lens of the eye, which is indirectly related to the ciliary body. So parasympathetic fibers, they are also supplying the ciliary body. So ciliary body is gone, then sympathetic fibers will take over the charge, and it will lead to the accommodation reflex loss. So that is the ophthalmoplegia is the word we are using for the problems of the oculomotor nerve at the level of the superior colliculus, that is the Weber syndrome. So whenever a question of the Weber transaction of the superior colliculus comes, then you have to give. At the level of the inferior colliculus, you are not using these terms. Then second thing which is involved in the Weber syndrome is the shaded area I have made in the corticospinal corticonuclear part. So because of the involvement of the corticospinal and the nuclear fibers, patient come with the contralateral or the opposite side hemiplegia. So that is second, the contralateral opposite side of the hemiplegia. And because of the corticonuclear, they are also present here in this area. So patient come with the paralysis of the muscles of the lower part of the face also. Lower part of the face is also involved, and it also contains the ascending fibers, that is the sensory fibers as well. So sensory fibers is lead to the loss of anesthesia sensation. Anesthetic sensations will be also lost in the Weber syndrome. That is how the present patient will present with this in the Weber syndrome. Then another syndrome related is called the Benedicts syndrome. Benedicts syndrome is almost similar to the this Weber syndrome, but here one more thing is involved in this syndrome is the red nucleus. So this Benedict's lesion involves the red nucleus. It involves the medial lemniscus and the corticospinal cord. So this shaded area is what is called the Benedict's syndrome. So patient comes with the problems of the red nucleus damaged, medial lemniscus as out of order, and corticospinal as usual. So because of the corticospinal, patient will having the same problem, that is called the contralateral hemiplegia will be there, as the oculomotor nerve is also passing through the red nucleus before it comes out. So ophthalmoplegia signs will be also there, persist in this syndrome also. Now the involvement of the red nucleus, it will lead to the, because as we know the function of the red nucleus is related to the cerebrum, cerebellum, basal ganglia, so it is all well connected. So because of the damage, patient come with the, so it is responsible to maintain the tone of the muscles actually. Because the ruberospinal fibers, they accompany the ventral horn cells and the motor nerves. And motor, as the M4M, the motor nerves, they will reach the skeletal muscles. So along with the motor nerves of the spinal nerve, 31 pairs, these ruberospinal fibers, they also reach the muscles. So what these muscles they are doing, what these fibers are doing with the motor fibers, they bring about the coordination of the muscular movements. And they maintain the tone of the muscle. What is the tone of the muscles? That in the conscious state, all the skeletal muscles from the head to toe, they remain in a slight state of muscle contraction. So that's why the rubero and red nucleus is there. So it is also under the control of the cerebrum, the motor precentral gyrus, from where the corticospinal fibers they are running. So they are also running on the same parallel. In the spinal cord also, in the lateral column, we have also made the corticospinal fibers. Along the corticospinal, we also make the ruberospinal fibers. They also occupy the lateral column of the spinal cord. So they are very, very near to them. So when they descend, so they have the tone of the muscle. So when this red nucleus will be damaged, ruberospinal tract is damaged, it will lead the tone of the muscle will be lost. And with the loss of the tone of muscle, what happens? There will be tremors. So tremor is the sign of the red nucleus damage. Tremor is also the sign of the basal ganglia damage. Tremor is also the sign of the substantia nigra that leads to the Parkinsonism disease. So a part of this substantia nigra is also damaged into this Benedicts. So patient come with that is called the rest tremors. Both with the red nucleus as well as this, both are interconnected. Basal ganglia are interconnected. Because the basal ganglia, they are near the ruberospinal tract. They are near the corticospinal tract. The lentiform nucleus, the globus pallidus, medial part. And putamen is the lateral. Medial, this is the thalamus. And here lies the head of the caudate nucleus, if you remember the position of the. So, this basal ganglia, they are made up of the grey matter. And The posterior limb of the internal capsule, which contains maximum fibers. The ascending fibers, they are the sensory fibers, are also lying over here, and descending fibers, as the whole of the body represented, head is anteriorly, the foot lies posteriorly, along with the rubrospinal tract is also accompanying them, right from the start. So they are sandwiched between the lentiform nucleus and the thalamus, and they have got a very narrow space through which they are descending. So why they have been made close to the corticospinal fibers? These are the basal ganglia, because the basal ganglia function is they also having the descending fibers. Basal ganglia and these corticospinal fibers, they are also descending fibers. Rubrospinal fibers, they are also descending fibers in the internal capsule. So because of the closeness anatomical position of the lentiform nucleus near to the posterior limb of the internal capsule, so these axons arising from the putamen, the caudate nucleus, and this is the caudate nucleus. So the fibers from the caudate nucleus, they also accompany the corticospinal fibers. So all the fibers, they accompany the descending rubro and the corticospinal fibers. And what is the main function of the basal ganglia? They are inhibition. They are inhibitory in function. While the corticospinal and rubrospinal, they are excitatory in function. They brings about the coordinated muscular movements of the body. Red nucleus, rubrospinal fibers, they bring about the tone of the muscles. So they are excitatory, and accompanied with the excitatory the fibers, they are the inhibitory fibers of basal ganglia. They bring the inhibition. So that's why we write down in the function of the basal ganglia that they controls the muscular voluntary movements of the cerebrum. They inhibit the unwanted movements. All the movements, they have to be beneficial for the human. So that is why the basal ganglia has been created very near to the descending corticospinal fibers. So what is the inhibition in the, you might have done in the physiology? So this is the one axon is going down from the gray matter, which is excitatory for the muscle, and the another neuron which is inhibitory like the basal ganglia, it also accompanies it, and it will hit somewhere. The neurotransmitter which are released from these axon terminals of the basal ganglia will bring about the inhibition of the impulses going down to the muscles. So this is called the inhibition. So axontic synapses formed by the basal ganglia neurons with the corticospinal and the rubrospinal fibers, they cut off the unwanted muscular movements of the body and make the muscular movements refined and beneficial to the human. For example, I want to pick this box. So this is the normal movement, I will pick it. Another movement is like this. This is over. Or I go like this, very slow. When I will reach here, he will take the box away. So movement of the muscular movement of the precentral gyrus should not be very brisk, that I may damage my nails, or this box may fall down if I am too fast, or if I am too slow, that is not beneficial. So this is a balance. And who is doing this balance? The basal ganglia. They inhibit or they cut off the unwanted movement or the brisk movement. That's why when this is damaged, patient lead to the disease chorea. What is chorea? Unwanted muscular movements of the body part. So this is how the inhibitory function. So because of the inhibition in the Parkinson, there is a rest tremors. So this is tremor. So this is how you explain the region of the tremors, because of the substantia and the rubrospinal and the inhibitory function is lost. Then you have to explain what is the corticospinal fibers and what is the, why the patient suffer from the contralateral hemiplegia due to the involvement of the medial meniscus. We know medial meniscus contains posterior column sensation of the spinal cord, 5 posterior column, fine touch, vibration sense, 2-point discrimination, kinesthetic and proprioceptive. So they will be lost. So patient come with the complaint of anesthesia, fine touch, vibration sense will be lost. So this is how we attempt the question of the Benedicts solution. So this finishes with the transfer section of the brain. Thanks, student.